Welcome to today's First Chapter Friday. The book that we are reading has been in print continuously since 1797 and was originally published under the name First Impressions. The book has been adapted widely to different movies, TV shows, and even has a lot of fan fiction about it, including one with zombies. The first title of this book was published without an author. It was simply titled by the author of Sense and Sensibility. That's right, today we are going to be reading the first chapter of Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. However, little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood. This truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. "My dear Mr. Bennet," said his lady to him one day, "have you heard that the Netherfield Park is let at last?" Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." That was invitation enough. "Why, my dear, you must know. Mrs. Long says that the Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England, that he came down on Monday in a chaise and four to see the palace, and it was so much delighted with it that he agreed with Mrs. Morris immediately that he wished to take possession of before the Michelmans, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of next week." "What is his name?" "Bingley." "Is he married or single?" "Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of a large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls!" "How so? How can it affect them?" "My dear Mr. Bennet," replied his wife, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." "Is that his design in settling here?" "Design? Nonsense! How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes." "I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them one by themselves, which perhaps will still be better, for as you are as handsome as any of them, Mr. Bingley may like you the best of any of the party." "My dear, you flatter me. I certainly have had my share of beauty, but I do not pretend to be anything extraordinary now. When a woman has 5 grown-up daughters, she ought to give over thinking of her own beauty. In such cases, a woman has not often much beauty to think of. But, my dear, you must indeed go and see Mr. Bingley when he comes into the neighborhood. It is much more than I engage for, I assure you. But consider our daughters. Only think of what an establishment it would be if one of them, Sir William and Lady Lucas, are determined to go merely on that account, for in general, you know, they may visit no newcomers. Indeed, you must go, for it will not be impossible for us to visit them if you don't." "You are over-scrupulous, surely. I dare say Mr. Bingley would be very glad to see you, and I will send a few lines by you to assure him of my hearty consent to his marrying whichever he chooses of the girls, though I must throw in a good word for my little Lizzie." "I desire you will do no such thing. Lizzie is not a bit better than the others, and I am sure she is not half as handsome as Jane, nor half so good-humored as Lydia. But you are always giving her the preference." "They have none of them so much to recommend them," replied he. "They are all silly and ignorant like the other girls, but Lizzie has something more of quickness than her sisters. Mr. Bennet, how can you abuse your own children in such a way? You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion for my poor nerves." "You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves. They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration at least 20 years at last." "Ah, but you do not know what I suffer. But I hope you will get over it, and I live to see many young men of 4,000 a year come into the neighborhood. It will be no use to us if 20 such should come, since you will not go visit them. Depend upon it, my dear, that when they are all 20, I will visit them." Mr. Bennet was so odd a mixture of quick parts, sarcastic humor, reserve, and caprice, that the experience of 23 years had been insufficient to make his wife understand his character. Her mind was less difficult to develop. She was a woman of mean understanding, little information, and uncertain temper. She fancied herself nervous when she was discontented. The business of her life was to get her daughters married. Its solace was visiting and news. The reason why I really wanted to read Pride and Prejudice is, of course, the new episodes of Bridgerton have dropped recently, and I'm watching them with my daughters. And it's so interesting because Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen, it's all the Regency era. It's all that same time frame. And so it's of interest right now, right? It's got a high level of interest. So that was the first chapter of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and I will be reading another book next week. If you have any comments as to which books you want me to read, please let me know, and we will continue doing these first chapter Fridays. And thank you for coming and reading a book with me.